We are back with a name change. Senators, Twins, Rangers, Expos, past, present, and future. All the teams that had anything to do with the Senators, all three of them, we're going to cover on this show. I'm Ralph Tycho from Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I'd like to introduce, before we introduce the guest, our two co-hosts, Ron Rabinovitz and George Case III. How are you, gentlemen?
Great. How are you?
Thank you.
Good.
Good.
We're very excited to have our guest today.
Please do us the honors, Ron.
Okay. Clark Griffith, he was in his early business career, he was part owner, treasurer, and executive with the Minnesota Twins, focusing on player contract negotiations, scouting, player development, finance, and business matters. He was a lobbyist before the Minnesota legislature and negotiated stadium use agreements at two stadiums. He was an early advocate of drug and alcohol treatment for athletes. He was also chairman of the board of the Major League Baseball properties and launched a national and international trademark licensing program and created its broadcast and marketing divisions. He was involved in the negotiation of Major League Baseball collective bargaining agreements and advises professional sports leagues in collective bargaining negotiations. He also served on the MLB television committee that established league-wide broadcast rules and monitored network rights, negotiations, and several other MLB committees. Mr. Griffith was educated at Dartmouth College and the Williams Mitchell College of Law. He also served in the United States Navy. It's an honor to meet and talk with Clark Griffith, who happens to be a dear friend of mine. And Clark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ron. Look forward to it.
Well, thanks for being here. Just with that resume, we don't need you. We got your resume.
nice of Ron to read it.
Right.
These gentlemen are going to ask you the questions that they're qualified to ask you. I just want, you're the son and the grandson of Major League owners. Tell me a little bit about your grandmother and your mother.
Very interesting question. Grandmother, actually great aunt, was my father's aunt, Addie Griffith. He lived with her after his father died, okay? She was a very interesting woman, very large, dominating, loud, opinionated. She was wonderful. I thought she was marvelous. She was my Aunt Addie, and she ran the roost. My mother, on the other hand, was the ultimate baseball fan in the family, and I probably learned as much about baseball sitting with her as I learned from anyone else. Her baseball expertise came from sitting in a box in the front row over the dugout at Charlotte Hornet games in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he taught her to keep score and comment on players and judge talent. She did that all through her teenage years. She also met the manager of the team at that time, my father, Calvin, and they ended up getting married in 1940. Okay?
How interesting. Wow.
She kept such meticulous score sheets that Tom Mee, Twins PR man, would refer to her score sheets when he had a dispute over a scoring decision or scoring record during the Twins season. He'd have her come in with her score sheet to see what really happened. I thought that was fascinating. And my scoring system is an adaptation of hers. She was a very good counselor to my father, although he did not take her advice all the time. He should have. He would have had a much easier life had he listened to her. But he had so many people fighting for his time that he couldn't do that.
Did she work Was she a stay-at-home mom?
Well, she was never stay-at-home, but she did, nor did she work. My father was an old-fashioned sort of fellow. He didn't want his wife working, but she was very active socially and with her friends.
Okay, so she, in a sense, she was an enabler for him to do what he did.
Well, she was a very active gardener, and you might be interested to know she grew some herbs in her garden, and she had chefs from various Minneapolis.
Why would you say that to me, Mr. Griffith? I feel like Herb is my middle name.
Her herb garden was so well known that chefs in Minneapolis would often call her to see if she had a certain herb available and would send drivers out to pick up a bundle of it. I thought that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
She sounds like a fascinating lady.
Fascinating.
Okay. Gentlemen, go at it. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy and learn.
George,
I'm going to jump in here a second, Ralph, and Ron, because I have a personal connection to the Griffith family in the fact that my dad, played for Clark's grandfather and actually was a coach for the Minnesota Twins in '68 when Calvin owned the ball club. And, some of the names of people that I heard, Clark mentioned were certainly people that I'm aware of and knew quite well. Ozzie Bluegee, who was with the Twins, and I'm sure Clark is very familiar with Ozzie. Ozzie was the manager of the Senators in 1943. And my dad was very close friends with Ozzie, and Ozzie had been with the ball club quite a bit. I think many, many years as I believe he was a controller for the Twins. And also in listening to Clark's resume, which was very interesting to me, I heard the mention of Dartmouth College, and my granddaughter is a freshman at Dartmouth. So
good for her.
We have a connection. We have a connection to the Big Green, and it's very interesting. I was not aware that Clark attended Dartmouth, but it's a wonderful school, and my granddaughter is very happy there.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Clark, you might not remember, but in 2001, you and I met at the symposium that I was asked to develop in Washington, D.C. at Howard University Hospital, which is built on the site of Griffith Stadium. And I met you that day, and we had a little conversation about baseball in Washington. And I didn't realize that, so many years later, you and I would be on this podcast together. But I certainly remembered meeting you, and your name was so familiar to mine. The fact that, Washington and Griffith Stadium and Clark Griffith and Calvin Griffith, certainly in the forefront of anyone who's ever followed Washington baseball, those names are very, very familiar.
That was a very interesting meeting at Howard University Hospital. They had what they thought was home plate positioned in the hospital floor. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And all of us who had been to the original stadium walked in and said, no, you're way off. Okay? And they were quite ashamed. They had it facing the wrong way and all this. And conversations with Jane Levy after that meeting, we actually, I think, came within a couple feet of positioning the plate correctly. It's in a much different area of the hospital. I don't know whatever happened to that, but I'd certainly like to see home plate positioned properly, probably in the middle of some surgical suite.
Well, you know what? I agree with you. I agree with you, Clark. When I went in, and I wasn't sure, because obviously the hospital is there and Griffith Stadium is not. But I know I was told that they had the batter's box and they had home plate and all that. I'm not sure that was accurate. I really had no way to tell. But I do remember. It was closer to
first base. Yeah.
Yeah, when I do remember when I went down there, they asked me a lot of questions about Griffith Stadium, and I was only a young boy at the time. But then in '61, when the expansion Senators, after the Twins had gone to Minnesota, I did work out at Griffith Stadium. I took infield and batting practice, and it was really a thrill for me to be on the same field where my dad and so many great players had played. But I had no recollection of the position of home plate or the layout of the diamond, relative to Howard University Hospital. I was just assuming that somebody had done the research, and that's what they came up with.
Well, we can figure that out if they want to do it.
Yeah.
I've got a map somewhere where I've actually did the analysis and I think properly positioned home plate.
That's great. That's great.
They have home plate for the Metropolitan Stadium is at the Mall of America.
That's correct.
Oh, is that right? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Is the Mall of America, is that built on the site of Metropolitan Stadium?
Right on top of it.
Okay. Right on top of it, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
I know when my dad coached for the Twins, I have some photographs of my father and Cal Irmer and Vice President Humphrey at the stadium when in 1968, before the new stadium was built. But the fact is that was a stadium that my dad, remembered quite well, and when he was coaching there. And there was another connection to Washington during that time, and that was the fact that Early Wynn, a great pitcher for the Senators, and during my dad's career, then went to the Indians and the White Sox. But Early Wynn was the pitching coach for the Twins the year that my dad was Cal Irmer's third base coach.
I remember that very well. Yep.
Burley
That's
Early
really interesting.
Burley Early, they used to call him.
Yeah.
Early. Yeah.
No, well, his nickname was Gus, and he was a tough guy. I mean, he didn't take any prisoners when it came to his position on the mound. And there was a story, I'm not sure it was true or not, but that one time his son, who I grew up with, we were next door neighbors of the Early Wynn and his family in Washington for a couple of years in College Park, that his son stood up and was taking batting practice and hit a couple shots off his father, and so his father knocked him down. And it wasn't intentional, and he just said, I just wanted to show my son who's boss.
Yeah. I used to particularly enjoy watching Early Wynn pitch to Roy Sievers. Early Wynn would challenge Sievers like no one else. High inside fastballs and sliders. He threw sliders on his fists, and there was a real contest. Magnificent contest.
I bet it was. I never had the privilege of watching that, but I can certainly imagine, because early, as I said, he was such a tough guy on the mound, and of course Roy Sievers being a great hitter, so it's always a challenge when you have a great pitcher going against a great hitter, and I'm sure they had some legendary battles out there.
Well, I listened to Early Wynn's 300th game win on the radio in my mother's kitchen. So, and he was over the hill, and he gutted that last game or two out to reach that historic mark. I think he was with the White Sox then.
Yeah, he was, Ralph, and I know that I've read some articles about that game. I think he was really struggling, but everybody was trying to do the best they could to get him that 300th win, because it certainly is a wonderful milestone for a major league pitcher to get to the 300 win level. And I know that early, I think maybe pitched 6 innings and then needed relief, but he really was out of gas, and he was at the end of his career. But it was such a highlight and such a challenge for him to be able to reach 300 that I think everybody was really happy for him to get there.
Clark, I'm going to throw in another question because I've got a big mouth. You've met a lot of ball players, a lot of people, a lot of human. Anybody that you met where you went, whoa, I'm in the presence of bum, bum, bum. This is anybody that really gave you the...
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the answer will surprise you. I knew a lot of major league players, and I said I used to go out with Mickey Mantle, and I drove Joe DiMaggio around Washington, and stuff like that. But the one time I had a moment like that, an oh my God moment, I'm actually talking to this fellow, was when I ran into James Cool Papa Bell in an airport.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
And when I was a kid and was reading American Heritage magazine, he published an article in American Heritage called How to Score from First on a Sacrifice.
Huh.
And apparently he did that. Okay?
Really? Wow.
And I kept asking people about James Cool Papa Bell. He's the guy who said, of this guy it was said that he was so fast that he could get out of bed and turn off the light in the room and get back in bed before it was dark. Okay? And I said, that certainly is the test for speed. And this was after an all-star.
Wait a minute, George. You're gonna have to stick up for it. I think the test of speed is running against Jesse Owens. But
well, you know what? I certainly knew of Cool Papa Bell and his reputation for speed, and I have no idea, as we've talked before, you can't compare different eras. But Cool Papa Bell, as Clark knows, was playing at Griffith Stadium, and I'm not sure that my dad ever met him, but he probably did. When the Homestead Grays were sharing Griffith Stadium with the Washington Ball Club. But that story about Cool Papa Bell being so fast is one that I've heard. I think it was Satchel Paige who might have said it. You know, certainly he was one of the fastest guys who's ever, ball players who's ever played the game. And my dad was one of the fastest who ever played the game as well. So, speed for both of those gentlemen was something in their genetic heritage, and one that I know the stories. And matter of fact, you mentioned stories. Here's one little story about my father. Jimmy Dykes, who used to be the manager of the White Sox and then the Philadelphia A's, one time was quoted as saying, "They tell me that Case is fast. When he's asleep, he's fast asleep." So, that's also a little story about my dad's
that's
speed.
A good
and
story.
Of course, the speed about the story about Cool Papa Bell was certainly one that talked about, the great speed that he had.
If they're,
that
the listeners are
humor
curious,
that's the kind of humor that was my grandfather's kind of humor and the humor of the day. Just a little touch on words there. I can't tell my grandfather's jokes on the air. But he was a product of his time, let's put it that way. And that was a cool word play, as they say.
For those who are interested, the article "How to Score from First on a Sacrifice" is available online. Just Google it, and it'll pop up.
Oh, it is. Okay, great. That would be interesting to see.
It's fun to read. It's
very
good baseball stuff.
I'll bet it is.
While I'm thinking of it, George, if you would be so kind, you guys have put together a CD based on the Senators, some spring training stuff. Tell us about that, how it's available on your website.
Well, Ralph, what it is that it's a DVD of color home movies that my dad took all during his career. As a matter of fact, there's some nice footage of Clark's grandfather opening day at Griffith Stadium, and there's considerable color footage and narration by my father and Mickey Vernon of the Washington players' spring training, various ballparks that don't exist anymore: Griffith Stadium, Sportsman's Park, Comiskey, Briggs, Cleveland Stadium, even Yankee Stadium. And these films were one that my dad was probably a little bit ahead of his time. He loved to take home movies, and it was all in color. He had been given some color film by a friend of his who worked for Eastman Kodak. And when I was a youngster, my dad at the end of the season would bring his film home and put up his screen and the projector, and he'd say, "Well, we're going to take a look at some of the things that I did over the year." And I would remember distinctly saying at the time, I was maybe 7, 8 years old, "Oh, Daddy, we have to watch these again." And then as I realized later in my life as I got older that this is really a historic record of what went on back in the World War II era, and the fact that my dad had narrated the film into a tape recorder, and then we put the film and the video and the audio tape together. And then I knew that Mickey Vernon also had similar footage, so we decided about 5 years ago to combine my dad's footage and Mickey Vernon's footage into a DVD that's about 60 minutes long, and we called it Ball Field to Battlefield and Back, from FDR to JFK. And there are color footage of the four presidents throwing out the first ball at Griffith Stadium, as well as many of the great players. Not game footage, but before the game, during spring training, personal remembrances that my dad and Mickey had of people like Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams and Bob Feller, and just a tremendous amount of historic film. And we have had a significant amount of really nice compliments from people around the country who've purchased the DVD and said, this is really a wonderful document, and we were happy to do it. And that's what I was trying to do when I first came up with it, to honor my dad's memory, because this was, personal memories of him. It was not a Hollywood production, or it was not something that was put together by HBO, although HBO used about 7 minutes of the footage for when it was a game series. But we were happy to do it, and I'm very pleased the way it turned out.
That's interesting.
Very nice.
Love to see that.
Where can folks get it?
If they go on our website, which is www.timelessbaseball.com, the ordering information for the DVD is on there.
Beautiful.
Very good. Very good.
Let me ask,
Clark?
Ron, how did you and Clark become acquainted originally? And we talked about him, Ron, when we were talking about getting Clark on. You mentioned that he's a friend, not just a Facebook friend, which is cool, but a friend.
Clark's a great guy. Clark's a great guy. I mean, I think I met you the first time, Clark. I came to talk to you about my ideas with Jackie Robinson and my friendship with Jackie. Yeah, at your office, as a matter of fact, I think.
That's right. And, I remember that very well.
Yeah, and from time to time we've stayed in touch, and it's just been an honor and a pleasure to know you. And I certainly appreciate your taking time here to be with us. And unfortunately, I've met Clark a few times at funerals of friends that we
That's right.
mutually know. And as we both get older, we tend to see more funerals.
Ron, you've mentioned Jackie Robinson. One of my favorite articles on my blog is called Jackie Robinson's Contribution to America. And,
really?
And at the 50th anniversary of Jackie Robinson's playing for the Dodgers, I was asked to participate in a panel discussing civil rights and Jackie Robinson and such. And I made the point that Jackie Robinson's playing in the major leagues was the single biggest civil rights act of a century.
Right.
That it predated the integration of the armed forces. It predated Brown v. School Board. It predated all of that. It ended the parallel universes that existed in America at that time, and really did more to start the integration process than any other single activity. And I think Jackie Robinson's a remarkable man, and I really like the work you did with him. A remarkable man.
Thank you.
And I don't think we pay enough attention to how superb he was.
Oh, he was
strong,
so tremendous.
Really intelligent. I also wrote an article on his court-martial.
Yeah.
I don't know, he was court-martialed in the Army.
Yes, he was.
Was he actually convicted?
No.
Was he actually convicted? No.
No.
Would you tell us about that, please, Clark?
As I vaguely remember, it was an insubordination question, and he was written up. Didn't go anywhere.
He refused to go to the back of a bus, an Army bus. And he says, I'm fighting for this country. I'm a member of the Army, and I can sit where I want. And the MPs came in, and they took him away, and he was court-martialed. He was found not guilty. But he fought for civil rights. The amazing thing was with Jackie was that he was a true fighter for a lot of causes that he felt were right, and they were right. And yet, those first couple of years with the Brooklyn Dodgers, he had to hold his tongue. That's the deal he made with Branch Rickey, and all the abuse he took. And you know, Clark, just as everybody else does here on the panel, when a rookie comes into the major leagues, it's a tremendous amount of pressure. Now you have all these obstacles of balls thrown at your head, and there were no helmets in those days. They wore baseball caps, and the pitchers threw just as hard then as they did now, spiking him, death threats, throwing black cat.
It was a much more rigorous game than it is now. Yep.
Oh yeah, much more rigorous. That's right. Absolutely.
And it's not on the field that he had to go through it. He had to go through it off the field.
Off the field.
Buses to and from the game, stuff like
hotel
stay, accommodations, right?
Right.
And he had to bring his wife, his poor wife, had to be there. Not had to be, was there to support him, and had to basically pick him up emotionally after the games. Tell me about, Ron, if you would, I'm sorry for digressing, gentlemen, but about the relationship of Jackie's wife and him, and how they were basically a team. They're the only team.
They were a team. They certainly were, Ralph. She's an amazing lady. I know her well. I've met her many, many times, and she, God bless her, she's still alive. She's 94, 95 years old, and she's still going strong. And she, just imagine sitting in the stands, watching the game, hearing all these terrible catcalls from fans, watching her husband being beaten and spiked, and all these other things that she went through with him. Now, I'm involved with George Washington University. Professor Richard Zamoff has a society called the Jackie Robinson Society. They have changed the name of that now to the Jackie and Rachel Robinson Society because she had such an impact.
That is so cool. That is
so cool. Yeah. And I go out there every year and I speak to the students there. I was there last October. And it's just an amazing relationship. They had a true love story. They were tremendous partners all the way through. The day that Jackie died, he was in the kitchen of his home in Stamford, Connecticut. And he had a massive heart attack. And as he was going down, he said, "Rachel, I love you." And he died right there on the floor in the kitchen in 1972. Tremendous. And then she carried his torch and kept it alive. The next year, in 1973, she founded the Jackie Robinson Foundation, which is a scholarship program for children of color and minorities to go to college. They have the greatest graduation rate of any scholarship program in the United States, 97%, which is way, way double the national average. And Jackie would have been so proud because education was so important to him. So she is a tremendously wonderful lady. I met her for the first time in 1997. It was the 50th anniversary. I was invited by the Twins to come to the Metrodome for a press conference where they were presenting a check to her in Jackie's memory on the 50th anniversary. And I was at that press conference, and I went up to her right afterwards, and I said, "Rachel, I'm Ronnie Rabinovich," and she hugged and kissed me. She said, "Oh, my God, Jack loved you so much." And I brought all the letters and the pictures, and she was so thrilled. That night she was on the field in opening ceremonies, and then she sat with me in one of the suites for about 4 or 5 innings, and we talked about our families. And just an amazing, amazing woman. I'm also dear friends with her daughter, Sharon, who is active in Major League Baseball, the vice president of education. She writes a lot of children's books, and she goes around the country speaking about her dad like I do. It's been a journey that I've been involved in since 1987. It's been my passion. And as long as I'm alive, I will carry it.
You wrote a book about being Jackie's friend, and I know it's got to still be available.
I wrote a book that's not available yet. It's a children's book. It's being published by Creative Memories, Creative Editions in Mankato, Minnesota. They're a big publisher of children's books. And it's called Always Jackie. Always, comma, Jackie. Because that's how he finished his letters. When he'd write to me, he'd write always, comma, Jackie. So it should be out next year. They just hired an illustrator. So my work is done. It's just a matter of them getting it produced and published. So looking forward to it.
Tell me the tone of the letters. They weren't just how you doing in school.
Oh no.
Stuff.
Oh,
you guys
they were deep. They were deep letters. I mean, they were warm, wonderful letters. They were, it wasn't Dear Ronnie, best of luck, Jackie. I mean, there were so many.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you a couple of examples here. Hold on, let me grab a couple of things here. Now, my dad was very active in politics. My dad was the Democratic National Committeeman for the state of Wisconsin. And Jackie was a Republican. And in all these sweet letters, he would write to me, and then he'd say, by the way, tell your dad this or that about the Democrats. It was so cute, and then he'd say, I don't know why I said that. I guess it's just my way of saying hello to your dad. And it's
for
just
those
amazing.
Listening, those were back in the days when a Democrat was much closer to a Republican than a Democrat. You wouldn't be hearing a letter like that today. Say hello to Mr. McCain for me, or give my best to Mr. Sessions before at the end of the week. Things a moderate Republican, you couldn't tell the difference between a moderate Republican and a Democrat. So I just want to clarify that. He had a wry sense of humor. It sounds like Jackie did.
Yeah. He was just a tremendous man. I can give you an example here. It's one letter he wrote to me. Dear Ronnie, it was good to hear from you again. I hope everything is fine at home. My family is fine. We have had a nice summer, and with school just around the corner, we're getting prepared. You're very kind to say the nice things you did. I learned a long time ago that a person must be true to himself if he is to succeed. He must be willing to stand by his principles, even at the possible loss of prestige. He must first learn to live with himself before he can hope to live with others. God has been good to me, and I intend to work as hard as I can to repay all the things people have done for me. I appreciate your friendship and feel as long as you set a worthwhile goal and head for it, you will do well. Continued good luck. Give my regards to the family. Always, Jackie. I mean, just beautiful letters. One letter he wrote to me, he gave me his unlisted phone number in Stamford, Connecticut, and invited us to come out. And in that same letter, he says, tell your father it still appears that the Democrats aren't willing to do anything for civil rights, and they will certainly feel it in the coming election. So, I mean,
it had to be Kennedy. When Kennedy was president, he never got the civil rights thing passed. It took a Dixiecrat.
It took Johnson, right? Right.
Yeah, no, it took Nixon. Right. Nixon passed the most important laws.
Did he?
Yeah.
He did? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Could you elaborate
like which
on
one?
that?
Clark, could you mention something about that?
No, we don't. That's not what the show's about anyway.
Okay.
Come on.
That's true. No, Nixon made it good with Red China. Let's put it that way. Well, if that's what you're referring to. And
I think you're referring to Title IX was a Nixon program. I think Voting Rights Act was Nixon program. I know that the integration of schools in Arkansas was an Eisenhower program. I mean, it's always Republicans. It's never Democrats.
Yeah, right. At those times,
that's what Jackie was talking about. If you want to get back to Jackie Robinson, he was talking about the Democrats' failure to take action where Republicans had taken action. That's why he was Republican.
Right, exactly. And because the leaders of the Democrats were Dixiecrats. They were from the South.
That's it.
And they were, it was that was the bottom line. Certainly, that's what it was. And he would get frustrated sometimes with the Republicans, and then he'd say, "Ike has made me a Democrat," and then he goes back to, "Well, I'm a Republican again."
No.
He would go,
Ike has made me a Republican.
Yeah. But then he said to me in one letter, "Ike has made me a Democrat," because he was frustrated with Eisenhower on some form of civil rights action that he didn't pursue. And then later on he said, "I'm frustrated with the Democrats and I'm back as a Republican, or independent leaning towards a Republican." So, I mean, he cared for whoever would help their cause. And it was just amazing. One of the other letters here I got real quick. "Dear Ronnie, I'm happy to know everything went well at your bar mitzvah." I had invited him, by the way. Unfortunately, he couldn't come. "My schedule has been so busy I've been able to keep up with outside responsibilities."
Jackie couldn't travel on Yontif. That was it. He would.
Yeah, right. "Tell your dad Ike has made me a Democrat, and it will take some time to make things change my mind. It doesn't seem as if I'll be getting to Sheboygan soon. My work has been very hard, and I haven't been able to get away as much as I presumed. Ronnie, one of the things that pleases me most is our friendship continues even though I'm no longer connected with baseball. It's friends like you that make me feel that everything that happened was worthwhile. I hope we do get a chance to see each other soon. It seems when people are as far apart as we are, they have a tendency to forget. I hope we don't. My regards to the family. I hope everything continues to go well. Always, Jackie." I mean, just tremendous letters. He was at my 10th birthday party.
And you kept getting these as an adult. It was just as thrilling as an adult to have had to go to the mailbox as when you were a kid. Probably.
Well, as we got older, as I got older, we wrote less and we talked on the phone more. And when I moved to Minneapolis, I was in the garment business. I sold children's apparel. I was a manufacturer's rep. And I used to get to New York quite often. And the first thing I would do when we landed was pick up the phone and call Jackie. Many times we'd have lunch. Sometimes if he was too busy, we'd just talk on the phone. And I was with him about 6 months before he passed away. He was in pretty rough shape. He had a heart attack. He was blind. He suffered from diabetes for many, many years. He was blind in one eye and was going blind in the other. And it was really tough to see him that way. And we met at this restaurant in New York, and I had to take him by the arm and help him into the restaurant. I felt so sad because I remembered him dancing up and down the mesas and driving those pictures crazy. And now I was helping him. And he was so happy to see me. He wanted to hear all about my family, and I, of course, about his. And then afterwards, I hailed him a cab, and I got him settled in the cab. And I leaned in, I kissed him on the cheek and told him how much I loved him. And I remember it as it was yesterday. I watched that cab disappear into sight. I had tears running down my cheeks because I knew I would never see him again. And 6 months later, he was dead. So it was amazing. I was in Los Angeles about a year ago. Larry King invited me to come out and did an interview with me. And he was telling me a story. The first time he interviewed Martin Luther King, he introduced him as the founder of the Civil Rights Movement. And Martin Luther King stopped him and said, "Larry, I have to correct you. I was not the founder. Jackie Robinson was." And it's true. It's true.
Wow.
Martin Luther King
Larry,
was in college
if you
at the
remember,
time.
was an avid Brooklyn Dodger, Jackie Robinson.
Oh, yes.
Koufax fan. He went to school with Sandy Koufax. That he had to have had those goosebumps that I got when I used to see Jackie on 125th Street in Lenox Avenue. I just out of high school. I had a debit insurance route in Harlem, and the office was on 125th and Lenox, and right down the block was chock full of nuts.
Yep.
I don't know if that was their corporate office. He had this big overcoat that it was winter, and, you'd see Jackie, and he had white hair. He was very prematurely.
He was white. Prematurely white.
Right. And you just see him, and it was just like you couldn't say anything. What do you say? That's Jackie frickin' Robinson. Just same as when you saw Cool Papa Bell, Mr. Griffith. What do you say? How did you greet him, sir?
I went up and introduced myself, and the name, of course, indicated to him who I was. And we talked about playing. The Homestead Grays were an absolutely superb team. And we talked, and I asked him, quite frankly, whether or not he actually had scored from first on a sacrifice. And he said he had. And I said, what's the most important part of that trick? He said, it's not the base runner. Anybody can do it. If the bunting player gets the ball down in the right place. Okay?
Wow.
You got to make sure the third baseman fields the ball.
Unbelievable.
That's very interesting, Clark, that you mentioned that, because my thing is I believe that bunting is almost a lost art today. Everybody's going for the home run, and very few players know how to bunt properly. And what Cool Papa Bell was saying was that you do have to learn where to place the ball if you're bunting. And so many guys are dipping their bat and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and it just doesn't work. And if you're a base runner and that bunt is down properly, I can see if you have great speed, if third base is not covered, if the third baseman charges the ball and third base is not covered, and you get the go sign from the coach, I can see it happening. It's very rare, but I can see somebody like Cool Papa Bell doing that. And, it is part of the art of bunting to move base runners up.
That's right. And there was a time if the third baseman had vacated third base, the catcher would go cover third.
Right.
Huh.
And that makes it perfect world.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, and that would leave it. Yeah, and that would leave it.
That's the perfect world. Third baseman halfway between the bases, and catcher on third, you just run right by him.
Right. Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
And you also have to have a rather dull-brained first baseman who can't believe what's going on when he catches the ball.
Clark,
That's
why
a great
there
story.
isn't so much bunting?
I'm going to ask Mr. Griffith and Mr. Case the same question, because when you said to Cool Papa Bell, when you just said, he got the name so he knew who I was, this thing and the other. There's obviously been times in both of your lives when, many, many times, every day, when the names that you were inherited helped you. Were there ever a time when it went through your head that, I'm losing a little bit of my identity? I wish in a way that people wouldn't treat me like they do for the wrong reasons, or I'm not formulating that right.
No, I know exactly what you're saying.
Disadvantage to it.
I wish my name was Stephen Griffith, for example, which would make it a lot easier. Okay, I'm well capable of handling my own affairs, and when people this guy's name is, and you know who his grandfather was and his father and et cetera. No one ever talks about me. It's horrible. I don't like that. And George has the same problem. Okay, he'd rather.
Yeah, you know what, Clark? It's interesting you mention that. I think it's a two-sided coin. I met a lot of people. I was in the athletic footwear business, and when I introduced myself, the conversation, a lot of times it was a door opener because it got you into places, and they wanted to talk baseball, or they wanted to talk about my dad, and that was fine. But
they want to talk about your dad. That's right.
As a young kid growing up and playing ball, I always had that in the back of my mind. Well, somebody's going to say to me, and they did when I was 11 years old. My dad went to a Little League game, saw me play, and somebody said, "Hey, Case, you'll never be as good as your old man." And, I burst into tears, and my father said, "Georgie, that's the last time I'm going to go watch you play because I can't stand to hear that kind of stuff." So it is something that you have to live with. On the other hand, I'll mention something about the Minnesota Twins and Harmon Killebrew, as Clark would be very familiar with Harmon. In 2001, for that same symposium that we did at Howard University Hospital, I called Harmon up and invited him, and I introduced myself. I said, "Harmon, my name is George Case." He said, "Hang on a second, are you George's boy?" And that started our conversation immediately. And Harmon was graciously accepted it. And then 9/11 happened, and he couldn't fly into Washington. But that was a situation where my name obviously rang a bell to the person I was talking with, and Harmon was very gracious in his comments about my father. So I've seen both sides of that coin.
Good answers, Jim.
Very interesting.
Yep. I appreciate
Very
that.
interesting.
I'll always remember that. I wish my name was Steve Griffith. It would have made life a lot easier. But I'll bet you would have gotten some plane reservations and some restaurant reservations as Steve Griffith.
I'm not so sure about that.
Well,
gentlemen,
I can tell you this, that Clark is a wonderful guy, and I didn't know Calvin, and I didn't know his grandfather, but I can tell you that he's a marvelous man, and I respect his friendship.
He was nice enough to come on this show, so I will always remember that in terms of it. Thank you so much. I'm honored personally, and it was terrific. We got it going, guys. Thank you for being my co-hosts, and we'll do it next week. And would you sometime come back and catch up every now and again, Mr.
You're talking to me? Absolutely.
Oh,
great.
Beautiful. That'd
be wonderful.
And next week we're going to run down the Twins right in the middle of spring training, what's coming up, who the best prospects are, and we'll not only include memories of the past as we continue the show, but we'll stay in the present and look to the future as well. So thank you, gentlemen, and to all of you out there, please keep on keeping on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.